Hi YouTube, my name's Sean Connors and this is Outsiders, and welcome back. Today I'm going to be answering a question that was posed by Brandon or Wolf, which asked the question, game versus roleplay. His problem that he had was the fact that his group, who clearly they've been playing a lot of Call of Cthulhu, and I've obviously played with him for, by the sounds of things, a few games, because obviously with Cthulhu you probably play for a small period of time, then you have another different style of Cthulhu that you probably play, because it is quite brutal. And his players have obviously got used to playing Cthulhu now, so the characters that they've started to design looking forward to the next campaign are all based around what's likely to happen. So it's all the sort of classics, library use, having amazing gun skill, the ability to dodge, from what I understand through your video, Brandon. And he said, I can't get them to, I can't get them to look at this from a logical point of view, because clearly this is what they want. What do I do? Do I just say, yeah, okay guys, and just adapt the game accordingly? What should I do? Well, actually, it's a great question. Really, it could have been used in a mailbag program, but I think it's only fair, as you posed the initial question, Brandon, to come back and answer it in hopefully the fairest way possible. And I want to use the full 10 minutes of this video to do that. First thing is, you put yourself in the shoes of the players is always the key when you're a DM. So if you think about Cthulhu, and there are many systems like it in some ways where they're bloody brutal, aren't they? I mean, Cthulhu has never lent itself, for me and my group, to long-term play, which has been one of the biggest fundamental problems. So, with that in mind, often the player's perception of Cthulhu is short-term. And so often when they're building characters, they think about it in the short term and just basically go all out to have the best possible character that they can have. And I mean, if you think about it from their perspective, this sort of makes sense. Equally as well, they've been getting used to the way you run things as a DM. So players adapt to you. So one of the biggest tips and pieces of advice that I can give you, and actually this would make a great mailbag program, is continually change. The most important thing is to adapt as a referee. Every time I run a campaign, I don't run two campaigns the same. I completely adapt it. I might be using the same set of rules, but I spin the whole thing on its head. Now, if I was in your shoes, I'd be happy to share this with you, Brandon. I'd be thinking about taking out the time period that you're utilising, and think about it in a very unique way if you want to continue playing Cthulhu, which obviously you guys seem to enjoy, which is brilliant. To get more longevity out of it as well, there's a few things that you could do. So, for example, what I would probably do is, you're playing more modern sort of game, you're talking about maybe Navy SEAL type things. It was brilliant, love the concept on it, but it sounds like you do a lot of modern stuff in Cthulhu. I guess that's probably based on the back of Delta Green, I would think, because that's sort of the new modern twist on Cthulhu a lot of people like. And that's fine, but once your players have done it a couple of times, then, as I say, this is the sort of, what you've got is a breeding of several things. A, they're getting used to as a DM, and B, the system they're playing that they've played a few times, they're used to the nuances of what make a really good character. So players will do what players do best, which is adapt. The referee has to change. That's the key. The players adapt, you change, if that makes sense. So it's I call it shifting sands. You have to continually shift your sands, move your perspective, change it. So if I was in your case, I'm quite happy to work alongside you to give you some ideas on this. And I'd quite happily share you a video building program on this. I would turn it on its head. So the first thing I would do is say, right, the next campaign, guys, I'm going to base round about the late 1890s. I'm going to put it in London. It's going to be a Victorian setting. It is Call of Cthulhu, but it's going to be very much more investigative style. I want you to bear that in mind. Role-playing is going to be much more on the agenda. It's going to be much more of an interaction type game, because obviously it's a game played by gentlemen. I expect you to think about your characters in that way. I want you to build good backstories. I'm going to explain the background about what's going on, why you're brought together, how you end up working together and investigating a particular problem. But I want you to put it aside, everything to do with the mythos. I want you to put that to one side and think about it more from a detective style, investigative style game. Even though you might come from a very odd walk of life, somehow you will get embroiled in an investigation, even though it might not normally be on your remit. So if you want to play like a member of the church, the bishop might come to you and explain about something that's happened, and therefore you will get embroiled in the story, investigate it. But equally, you might get involved because the bishop says, well, what we've done, I've utilised some people who've helped the church before, and brings you all together. So you can quite quickly see that it can be a much more interesting game. And although you might think, oh, okay, Sean, that's fine, but where where's that hint of the mythos here? Where does that come in? You know, how do I re-engage that fear factor underneath what makes most Cthulhu games tick? It's pretty simple, really. My initial thoughts would be you have it around and investigating that there's been a spate of grave robbings in London, and I would use the bishop idea straight away because it just really springs to mind. You've got the great, if you've seen any of my videos, you've got the great one where you can put a grey shirt on, a little bit of a white paper to create the bishop maybe, or even the vicar that comes over. It would be fantastic to play that part in. And then you have information around the 3 grave robbings and stuff like that. I've got already a vision of that coming to mind, and the players are investigating those grave robbings. So straight away, grave robbings, Cthulhu, it's the players are already going to go, but he told us it was all roleplay. And it can be, but you just keep the hint, the suspicion of something odd in the background all the way through. So you get a really long run at the game until the conclusion, and at the conclusion maybe there's something more sinister. But if you can keep the hint running through, and not always, it's like, as they say in terminology, you know, keep your finger on the trigger, but it doesn't mean you don't have to pull it. The threat is always there. That's the skill I think you've got to do, so you can get your game and your role play balance right. Also, groups as well formulate a style, a play style, Brandon, really, to be honest, after a period of time. And your group will be no different than anybody's. Now, that's why I continually shift my DMing perspective all the time. I don't allow myself, I play a campaign a particular way, but at the end of the campaign, I'm already gearing up towards the next. I take a shift of position so that they're never quite sure. And it's like every story I run, I always say, it's always a twist on everything. You know, players, you can throw a little twist in every single storyline, and suddenly everybody's never quite sure which direction you're going in, and it's a brilliant perspective to come from as a DM. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of players, I think, stick around my table, because they realise that what they love is the challenge, and they love the fact that they're never quite sure. Cthulhu can do that for you as well, can't it? Because that's one of the beautiful things about Cthulhu. But if you take a step away and think about it in terms of something completely different genre, it does a lot of things for you. You're based in America, so taking somewhere like London as a base means that you've got to do a bit of research about it. Your players won't be used to it. 1890s is well away from their comfort zone. You know, it's a completely different perspective. You're going to look for more role playing from them, so it's going to be a bit more. Yes, yes, indeed. Well, the good book says that one must, and you can play in more role play, which is what you're looking for. So the players have adapted. You've now got to change and shift your sands. Move your position, and you'll get what you're looking for. So anyway, that's a sort of a recap on it, Brandon. That's what I would genuinely do to be honest, if I was in your shoes. As I say, I'm quite happy to share with you. I've got a fantastic visualisation of a grave robbing investigation to start the game off with. And I think that could formulate a new building programme, actually. And I'm quite happy to put my thinking cap on if it's any use to you. And I'd be quite happy to put in sort of a building programme around these grave robbings to give you something to work off. I mean, don't take it verbatim, but by all means, if it would be any use to you, Brandon, I'd be happy to sort of share that so that you could start planning ahead. But definitely take a shift back, take a shift in position, and make it clear that it's not about the mythos. And although the hint will always be there, so from the moment the game starts, the players will think, well, he said there was no mythos involved, and suddenly you've got these grave robbers, so they're already going to be going, it's the mythos, it's the mythos. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be. As long as your finger's on the gun, they're never going to be sure, and that uncertainty is going to be fascinating. Also, the other thing as well, it would get away from the sort of problems you're having in terms of weaponry, guns, and various other things, because in this sort of situation, if the players, say, are investigating someone who goes to a theatre in London, they're not likely to be able to walk into the theatre carrying a shotgun, are they? So something might kick off in the theatre, and what have they got to hand? A chair leg or something. It's much more fun and much really interesting, because it creates that fantastic situation that I think most DMs look for. Anyway, Brandon, I hope that's been of some use to you. Great question. Welcome aboard to the community. Thank you for posing the question, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to answer it for you. I hope it's helped. Until the next time, take care of yourselves, and happy gaming. See you soon.